Welcome to the For Love and Money podcast, the show where business and social purpose meet to inspire a movement for positive change. Here's your host, Carolyn Butler-Madden.
Hello. My guest today is Shirley Chowdhary. Shirley is a remarkable leader whose career defies boundaries and expectations. She has worked across law, finance, Indigenous education, and she now sits on multiple boards where she's helping shape the future of governance and leadership in Australia. She's a non-executive director, a chair and former CEO with a deep international background from New York and Tokyo to Sydney. And she's known for bringing cultural intelligence and courage to every table she sits at. Shirley currently chairs Women for Election. She serves on the University of Sydney Senate People and Culture Committee and advises organisations like Propel Group and Mentor Walks, while also researching how boards can adopt AI as a collaborative thinking partner to enhance judgment and trust in the boardroom. In this conversation, Shirley and I explore the role of love and purpose in business and what love really looks like when applied to leadership. She defines love as passion, commitment, resilience, and connection, qualities she's lived throughout her own rich and non-linear career. We talk about leadership and identity, the importance of creating space for diverse voices, not just gender diversity, but diversity of lived experience and thought, and the responsibility of boards to lead with foresight, inclusion, and integrity in a world being reshaped by technology and social change. Shirley shares her thoughts on the potential of AI as a collaborative tool for boards, and she highlights its ability to enhance decision-making and strategic planning, but she also highlights some of the risks that come with it. She also shares her own career journey, including the choices and trade-offs between family and ambition, and what she's learned about balancing commercial imperatives with social impact, or, as we like to say here, the dance between love and money. This is an inspiring and deeply thoughtful conversation about how purpose, governance, and courage intersect to create better leadership and better outcomes for all of us. I hope you enjoy this interview as much as I enjoyed doing the interview with Shirley. Shirley, welcome to the For Love and Money podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here.
Thank you, Carol. I'm so pleased to be here. I'm only sorry that it took us so long to organise, and that is entirely on me.
Not at all, and the timing is perfect for whenever it happens, right? So I'm going to ask you the question I ask every guest, and that is, I'd love your view, Shirley, on whether you believe there is a role for love in business.
Such an interesting question. And, when I first read the question in your email, I thought, oh, that's an interesting question to ask. But then as I thought about it, what I realised was love is just a combination of a whole bunch of other things. It's commitment, it's passion, it's approaching your work with a desire to be there and a happiness to be there. And so I think if you think of love more broadly, absolutely, it has a role to play. I've been in the workforce for 30 years and work is not always easy. You have ordinary days, you have great days, you have less than ordinary days, and you need resilience to get through all of those. Because if you don't have some sort of commitment and passion, that's going to be really hard to find. I do think, though, that kids coming out of school today don't need to know what they have a passion for the minute they step out of school. It might take them some time to find. And the latest research I read suggested that those kids could have, people starting in the workforce today could have up to 14 facets in their career. So
That's extraordinary.
They may all be connected. Maybe they're totally disparate. But the point is, none of us need to have a linear path these days. And I think I've done that already. So maybe in some ways I was on the vanguard of that kind of thinking inadvertently, but it may take them time to find their passion, and maybe they'll do something for 5 years and then pivot to something related or different, and it'll take them some time. But you need the commitment to be able to find that and the passion for your place in the world, what you think you're adding. And I think having a North Star of some sort is really important.
Yeah, and that's so interesting. And I guess because the world is changing so rapidly, like it's a dynamic environment, and that diversity of skill sets that they can, accumulate is going to be very, very rich for many of them. One of the things I was thinking when you spoke about that is this idea of love and passion. You can love what you do. And in my past agency life, I used to love what I did. I loved the skills I got to use. But, you know, what I used them for, I wasn't in love with. And
Yeah, and I think
today,
that's okay.
yeah, it is because, you're building up these skills, you're doing things, and you don't have to be fully passionate about everything all of the time. But where you can get to over time, as you start getting a clearer understanding of yourself, your identity, what you care about passionately, that's when you can potentially use those skills and diverse experience to move to loving, not just loving what you do, but doing what you love.
Yeah, I agree. And I think too, it's okay to recognize that you are in different roles for different reasons,
Mm,
but understanding why you've taken that role. So you might take one role to get a particular skill or to get a set of skills. And then you might take another role to broaden that
yep,
experience. You might take another role because actually you just need the money to pay your
yep.
rent or to pay your bills. And that's okay. I've had those conversations with so many people in my life, and friends and colleagues have all said that if you just understand why you're there,
Mm,
sometimes it's easier to get through that period and just accept, actually, I'm here. This is hard, but I'm here for this one particular skill. Just need to build that. Or I'm here for the money and I just need to stay here 2 years and then I'll feel more confident to go into my next role. But it's okay to prioritize different things at different times. You don't have to be constantly prioritizing what you see as your career. And I think women in particular face a lot of guilt around this. When they step back to have a child or take parental leave, there's a lot of guilt. I know with me, there was a lot of guilt associated
mm.
with that. And so we just need to make it okay for people to take on different roles for different reasons and prioritize different things at different times.
I think that's really wise advice, and I think there's such a strong emphasis for, particularly for young people today, about what is my purpose? I've got to find my purpose. And what you're saying, and what I think is really smart, is you don't have to find the purpose. It is, what is the purpose of this particular experience
Yeah,
that I'm
exactly. That's
undertaking?
exactly right. And I've had conversations with younger people in the workforce. I mean, to me, everyone's younger, but 20s and 30s, where they've said, I feel really guilty. I've, got one child, another on the way, and I feel like I'm taking my foot off the accelerator. That's okay.
Mm.
It's okay to be comfortable for a while and not to push so hard because you're at that stage of life. And the stage of life will come when you can push harder and let go of family a little bit. And so I think we just need to be kinder to ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Now, let's talk about your background.
Not a topic I love talking about.
But it's so interesting to everyone else, right? So your background spans law, finance, Indigenous education, and now multiple board roles and women in politics. What were the key moments or influences, do you think, that shaped you and brought you to the work that you do today? Like, what were the pivotal moments for you?
I think Oh, look, I don't think there's been just one. I think there've been multiple moments across my career. I originally started off working with a Wall Street law firm, a New York Wall Street law firm, where I did the New York bar. But the reason I did that was because I met my husband. We've been married for 31 years, and I met him and he was working and living in Japan. And so I chose family over staying here and building a career. And so I had to find work in Japan, and that's what led me to New York and then back to Tokyo. After 10 years of doing that in Japan, working for this New York law firm, Cleary Gottlieb, and then JP Morgan, we moved home. And again, that was for family. My mum was not well. And so I took 10 years off my legal career, did lots of other things, but spent 10 years at home with family. And then my kids got older. My husband wanted to work at home. Oh, he wanted to look after the children and not work. So we swapped roles and I went back to the workforce and he stayed home. Again, that was to prioritize family. And then my kids are now older. I don't have one child living at home, which is particularly sad. But I can also then prioritize the things that I want to do. And so I think if I looked back at my career and what the themes were, the one overarching theme is that I have prioritized different things at different times. And, I said earlier we should be kinder to ourselves. I haven't been kind to myself. It took me about 12 years to admit publicly that I'd had a career break. I mean, people in my circle knew and people who I worked with knew, but I never talked about it publicly because there was a lot of shame attached to that. I think I've also been privileged to have people around me, my family, who were willing to support my career choices and support when I wanted to step back and go back in. And that's a huge privilege. When my husband was working, I didn't have to worry about rent or paying the mortgage. And he was prepared to have a very different lifestyle by stepping out of the workforce and letting me go forward again. And so we've made choices that we haven't always prioritized wealth and money. We've prioritized different things, and that's just a lifestyle choice. I understand that not everybody has that privilege and not everybody wants to make those choices. But I think those two things have been pivotal. So one, making different choices at different times, and two, having people around me who supported those choices regardless of the lifestyle change it meant for them.
Yeah, and it's obviously opened up opportunities for you to actually pursue what you care deeply about.
Absolutely. And, if I look at every role I've had, and some roles have been far more enjoyable than other roles and far more of a privilege to be in, if I hadn't done the roles that I had done, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing today. And so, I've almost learned more from the dysfunctional leaders I worked for than the really good ones. And learned a lot about myself in that journey. I mean, I look back to the kind of leader. I was a leader of a group of 10, a team of 10 when I was 30. I was such a lousy leader when I was 30, and so I'm a work in progress too.
We all are. I look back to when I managed the agency and I think about some of the ways I managed people, and it was like, oh my God, if only I had known this then.
Absolutely. I've got exactly the same kind of regrets.
Yeah. So in past interviews, you've spoken about not being part of the majority, living across cultures, speaking multiple languages, and how those experiences gave you resilience and shaped your perspective. I love you've also said you fail at least 10 times a day and learn
before I get up out of bed. Yeah.
So, that rich diversity of experience and cultural experience as well, how have those, do you think, shaped the way you lead and the way you show up in the boardroom?
I think diversity of experience is so important. What it gives me and the benefit I see in it is that because I've seen so many different things, if you take the career experience, I've been a private practice lawyer, I've been general counsel, I've been in a legal team in-house, I've been a CEO of an Indigenous not-for-profit, I've sat on boards as chair, deputy chair, and a non-exec director. I've been a management consultant, done advisory and consulting work. And I've been mother and a wife and all those other roles that we have outside our career. I think what it means is that when we're in a situation, especially high stress situations that really challenge us as leaders or as in an organization, I often can see pathways that might not be so obvious. And I think that's the benefit. That's why we need people around a table who think differently. Because somebody who has lived in Australia their whole life and I don't say this to criticize any career path, but just as an example, if you've been a lawyer in a law firm for 30 years, that's going to give you a particular set of experiences. really valuable,
Mhm.
but very different to somebody who's had a law career and lived in 5 countries and speaks 3 languages and grew up in a culturally diverse background and worked in-house private practice kind of all over the place. They're a very different set of experiences. Neither one is better than the other, but we need both types or different types of experiences around the table because so I sit on boards now. When you sit on a board, you're faced with a decision or a problem you're trying to solve for. You often don't have all the information you need. Like, we don't live in a perfect world.
Yep.
We don't have 100% of the information we need. Often you're operating with 50, 60, 40, whatever that percentage is of information. I want people who are going to think 5 steps ahead, who are going to think 5 steps ahead in a different direction, who have seen these problems before, who are coming to that problem with fresh eyes. So I think that diversity adds massive, massive value. And I worry that companies that aren't leveraging that diversity of experience, diversity of thought, the diversity of education. Like, I want people who haven't been to university around that table as well. Age, all of those different types of diversity, neurodiversity, disability. We need all of that around the table because that's how we're going to innovate better, increase productivity, and get better results for our organizations.
100%, 100%. And yet, what's the reality? What reality do you see in, in the boards you've seen and worked in? Are we there? Are we getting there? Are we far away?
I'm going to be recalcitrant and say, no, I think we've got a long way to go.
Mm.
I think I think it's really easy to keep putting people we know onto organizations. And, when I was 30, part of the reason I was a really lousy leader is because I hired people like me. Not people who looked like me, but people who had similar university experience, who'd had academic careers, who, had similar levels of privilege to me, who talked like me, who I liked, who I got on with.
Yeah.
And I realized 20 years later that actually the people I want in my team are the people who challenge me and think differently. I want people, and I tell CEOs I work with all the time, I need you to tell me when I'm wrong. And I'm pretty strong-minded. It's not always
No.
not always easy to sit across a table, as my family will tell you, and tell me that you think I'm wrong.
Yeah.
I think I'm reasonably open to it, but that's still a hard conversation to have. And so now I want to surround myself with people who tell me I'm wrong all the time. Because if you tell me I'm wrong, then I have an opportunity to grow. If I don't know, often don't, blind spots are blind spots because we don't know what they are. And so you need people who you trust around you to tell you what you could be doing better. And one of my mentors years ago said to me, I won't use the word he used, feedback's a nightmare. Because it comes from different perspectives. It's often given with different levels of love or not. And so as the recipient of feedback, we have a choice. We have to look at that feedback with some kind of objectivity, if we can muster it, and work out what heart that feedback was given with.
Mm-hmm.
What was the intent of the feedback? Not all feedback is given with positive intent. So what was the intent of that feedback? And then if there is an element of truth in there, how can we address it and what can we do to grow beyond that? And that was one of the most pivotal pieces of feedback I ever got because, there probably is some truth from somebody's perspective in that feedback, and you have to look at it deeply and wonder what you can do to get better. I think often I react to feedback. I take feedback to heart dreadfully, and I spend a lot of time in my head agonizing over feedback. And, with
giving it or taking it?
No, taking it with that negative self-talk. And that's not always easy. I'm harder on myself than I am on anybody else. And, and that's saying something because I have high expectations of people, but, and that's not positive either. So that's why I think I'm a work in progress.
That's gold, what you just shared about, what your mentor shared with you about assessing feedback, and I guess it requires curiosity, right? To be able to actually think about those three things that you talked about. And I'm curious.
And also self-awareness, right?
Yeah, yeah. And so in your experience on boards, do you find is the environment created for that discussion, to be able to have a discussion around different points of view? Or is it sort of driven to get people on board quickly with
No,
quick.
look, I made a decision last year that I'd only work with people that brought me joy. So my board portfolio now is quite joyful. And one of my boards in particular, we are particularly good at giving each other feedback,
Mm,
with the CEO as well, I think. And we each take feedback, including me. I've been in board meetings where one of my directors has said, actually, I think we could have done that better. And the minute somebody says it, you can absolutely see it.
yeah.
But it takes deep trust that people are coming at you with feedback from a positive place, like they're trying to actually make the board better and make the organization better. And so there's a high level of trust, there's a high level of good intent. And the way it is done is not to bring you down or to belittle you in front of others. It's actually to get to a better place. And I think those things are really, really important. And so I've had the privilege of being on a few boards now where that's the case. And it comes from the chair, but it
Yeah.
also comes from the people around the table.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. So boards today, obviously, business organizations, we're facing unprecedented challenges and change. We've got climate change, technology, AI, shifting social expectations. What are you most passionate about driving change in? And how do you see your role as a director in shaping the future that you want to contribute to?
So I work on boards. I'm a governance specialist. I believe good governance underpins a whole bunch of other things. It underpins commercial outcomes, productivity, getting the best out of our people, and performance, which are the things that we really care about on a board. It's about building trust in the organization, building a positive culture, setting expectations for behavior, whether it's through compliance systems or, the culture that the board sets from the top. All of those are really crucial, and that's what drives me. I think governance can make a massive difference. And governance includes those things we talked about earlier, like diversity, who's around the table, how you pick people for the board, all of those things. The other thing that I'm focusing a lot on at the moment is AI governance for boards. I'm spending a lot of time in that space. My view on that is AI is here to stay.
Mm-hmm.
It's not without risks, it's not without issues, but boards have to be open to what those issues and opportunities are. And I'm still having discussions with directors where they say, "Oh, I'm not sure about it."
Really?
And yeah, absolutely. And that really concerns me. I think those boards are going to be struggling and left behind. So I think the technology is here to stay.
Mm-hmm.
We live in an age where change is just part and parcel now of what we do. Change management and change fatigue are massive, massive issues for organizations. And so working with our people to understand their stress points and where they see the issues, I think is really, really key for a board to manage this transformation environment. And it doesn't matter what organization you are, whether creating a widget, providing a service, educating, there's a deep imperative for us all to look at what we do in our organizations and step back from it.
Mm.
And say, actually, rather than embedding, rather than process mapping a process from end to end and working out where we embed AI, the question should be beyond that. It's how does AI actually change our business model?
Mm.
How should we be rethinking about our business model? And there's a lot of fear about workforce displacement,
Yeah.
and I think rightly so. But my view is that I think companies have there are two ways to address that. Some companies are saying they're going to be smaller. Other companies are saying we're going to keep the same people, but we're going to use that added capacity to do the things we want to do to grow. And I think both there's nothing wrong with either approach. But in both approaches, we have to, as organizations and leaders, think about the people in our workforce and how we are upskilling them and reskilling them in this new technological age. And I think that onus comes with being an individual in the workforce. So it's on me, but it's also on my organization to support that transformation. And that will be critical. And, you know that I care about gender equality and leaving no one behind and all of those things. And all of those societal issues that we face today are just going to become more amplified. And so I think we need to really have an eye on all of those things to make sure.
Enjoying the podcast? If you're looking for more inspiration, head to our website, thecauseeffect.com.au, for more resources on how you can start using your business as a force for good. Or buy the For Love and Money book. Every copy sold allows us to protect 1 square metre of rainforest.
As you speak about that, Shirley, it makes me think about, 20, 30 years ago when the alarm bells started being rung for climate change. And I often think about, what if we had done the work then? What if governments and business and community had actually done the work to go, okay, what do we need to change? How do we ready the communities that rely on mining and fossil fuels to make sure that they're thriving in the future when this comes? And we've not done that. And
absolutely. And the imperative is even more urgent today.
And there's a parallel, isn't there, with AI?
There is. There's one difference, though. One major difference I see, and that is we were able to ignore the signs on climate change. At the beginning we said, oh, it's just a group of people shouting. We were able to put it to one side. I think the difference with the technological age we're in and the advent of AI is that if you're not using AI to keep your clients, somebody else will be using AI to take them. And that's not my line, it's Tim Trumper's line. But I think that is just so true. And so if you don't do this, it's going to be done to you and you're going to have no choice. I think climate change has we've allowed it to have a longer lead time, if you like. We're 2025, we're still talking about 2030 and 2050. I suspect that this AI change is going to be most fundamental in the next 5 years.
Yeah. So you've just
the impact it has on our organizations.
Yeah, without a doubt.
This is the dumbest AI is ever going to be.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, I'm just spitting out cliches, but I think we just need to take heed of them. Otherwise, companies will go under.
So you've described AI as a collaborative thinking partner for boards.
Yep.
What excites you about this, and what are the risks that leaders need to be conscious of?
Oh, look, what excites me is I think we can get better. I think, we are fallible as humans. We don't remember everything. We remember things incorrectly. We put our own biases on top of what we decide and how we think about things. We have the ability with AI to really raise that level of engagement as board members. And, on some of the pilots that we've run, that I've been involved in, we've used AI in strategy days and done red teaming, blue teaming exercises to really challenge what the board was thinking. We've used AI that is grounded in historical materials to fill the gaps on what we've forgotten or what we don't know. AI to write better board papers, to get directors thinking better before they enter the boardroom, to get better decisions in the boardroom. And I think, the place that we all start, or that directors tend to start, is minutes. Let's use AI for minutes. It's no secret that I think that's the worst use of AI in the boardroom. I think there is so much more we could be thinking out about detecting bias, challenging groupthink, director evaluation, board evaluation, but not once a year or twice a year, but constantly, constant feedback loop. I think there is so much we can do. We need to think about data sovereignty. I don't think we're having enough conversations about data sovereignty, about where the inference models sit, about the use of electricity and water and everything else, the environmental impact that is exponential with the use of AI. I think we're thinking about management or oversight of operational AI. We're talking about governance policies but are enough boards talking about the explainability of decisions made with AI? Are we talking about decision audits? And that question that I asked before, which I think is the existential question, if I step back as a director from my business model, let me propose that a different way. If I step back from my business model and somebody else was starting my business today, how could they do it compared to how I do it?
Yeah.
Because, my company might have 200 years worth of history or 50 years worth of history. That creates processes in an organization that you may not need to replicate. And I worry that what we're doing is process mapping what we do now and replicate, trying to make those processes more efficient using AI. And efficiency and automation is absolutely part of the use of AI, as are bespoke customer experiences. All of those are really, really beneficial. But I bet if you stepped back from your business model, there'd be 10 processes you might not need today, given that AI might be able to do them. And so how else can you deploy your manpower? How else can you think about what you produce, the widget or the service or whatever it is you're trying to do in a different way? And I don't think we're asking those questions.
It's such a valuable
I don't think
resource.
we're asking those questions enough.
Yeah, and the responses, the solutions, the feedback you get is only as good as the inputs.
Absolutely,
the questions.
Absolutely. And I think one of the other issues that I touched on earlier is, I talked about the risk of amplifying the societal issues we have. There's some research to show that we're, for example, training people in our companies on AI, but the training tends to be at the leadership end, so the board and management teams, the upper echelons of our companies. They are still predominantly male. And so now we've got a gender issue. We're training more men than women in AI. We've got the other end of the scale at the lower socioeconomic levels, we've still got a digital literacy problem. We've still got a digital access issue. And if you think of, I'm on the Senate PCC, People and Culture Committee at the University of Sydney. And if you think about kids coming into that loop, into a university, if we don't make those AI tools more democratically available, then those students coming in who have the privilege of being able to afford AI are going to be in a different position to the ones who can't afford AI. And all we're doing is amplifying the gap. And I worry with technology that we need to constantly think about that gap. When COVID was here, when we were in the middle of it, I was CEO of the Go Foundation. And one of the things we realized was that access to the internet and computers was not equal. And we gave out, I can't remember the number of computers we gave out with access to the internet, but that made a massive difference for students trying to do online learning when they didn't have a tool to be able to do it with. And we've still got that problem. That problem hasn't gone. And so I worry that we're amplifying those issues. We need to turn our minds to them to make sure we don't leave anyone behind.
And thinking about that gap as well, like we've talked about using AI, what about what AI draws from? Is there a risk that the content that AI draws from is skewed away from diverse perspectives?
Well, absolutely. And, I think that's a big issue. There's a lot written about that. I think one of the things so on some of my boards, we're creating closed systems and we're feeding documents in. But if you feed, for example, documents into a model to provide some historical grounding to your organization, and that information is 100 years old, you bet your bottom dollar it was written by white men.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So there is a bias inherent in our systems, in our history, that we're not going to get around.
Yeah.
But we have to build systems that can acknowledge it and can, have information to draw on to balance those views. And that's hard. That's not easy. But And you also have to, one of the things I teach my kids is that when they look at the output of AI, it's not a source of truth.
No.
It is an output based on the inputs it has. So you have to critically analyze it. And I think, universities and schools have to be teaching critical skills related to critical analysis more than anything, curiosity and critical analysis, because if you get an output that makes your research, makes your research time 10% of what it would have been, that is really useful. But you still have to apply yourself to it. And that's why I always talk about this collaborative use of AI. It's never, I don't think at this moment in time it stands by itself.
No.
But together with us, wow.
And that's really interesting because I've been using it a lot, but I've also got to a point where I'm being very intentional about when I want to do the thinking myself.
Yes.
So I've uploaded a huge knowledge base with books and methodologies and things. But even so, I've found at times when I've used it, it's got to the end very quickly.
Yes.
And the destination is not necessarily the point.
No,
It's
absolutely.
the journey you undertake, right?
Yeah. But also, imagine look at using that output and going back into the AI and saying, actually, you got this wrong. I don't think about that like that. I think about like this.
Yeah.
Can we rewrite that section? And then playing with it and saying, actually, I don't like that word. And so it becomes a research. I always think of it like a research intern, that you can spar with.
Yeah, 100%.
To get the best result. And it's that sparring that leads to the best result and leads to your result, not a plagiarized result, and a result that you can actually replicate.
Yeah. Yeah. And if boards don't take the lead on this, surely boards should be taking the lead on this, not just in terms of adopting AI, but setting the ground rules for how and where it's used and how it integrates with human thinking. Yeah, if boards do not take the lead on this, what do you think the implications of that are for companies?
Oh, what I said before, I think companies will fail. I think there's an imperative that's closer to home for directors, though. As a director, we have a duty of care and diligence. That means we have to, understand the financial and business position of our organizations and make sure that we're doing whatever we can to get the best decision possible. In 5 years, if we're not using AI like this, maybe we're not meeting our fiduciary duties.
Yeah.
And so I think as directors, we have to make the best decisions we can with the best information we have.
Yeah.
If you're not using AI, are you doing that?
I want to steer the conversation to your role as chair for Women for Election.
Yep.
And congratulations. Thank you so much. I think this is such an important thing. And Women for Election is working to inspire and equip more women to step into political leadership. I feel like I'm going to ask this question. It irks me that I asked this question, but given what's happening around the world, I'm going to. Why is this important?
Oh, there's a lot of research to show that when you get more women into actually, let me start somewhere else. We all, as citizens of this country, deserve to see ourselves represented in democracy, all of us. And that's not the case today. So that's the first thing. Our structures of government should reflect who we are as a population. So that's really important. The second thing is there's a huge amount of research to show that when you get more women into those discussions in politics, you get better outcomes. You get outcomes that are targeted at community. You get better outcomes not just for women, but for all parts of community. You get less war. You get more diverse perspectives. There's a whole range of research. And, if anyone's interested, Women for Election have shared a lot of this research through LinkedIn. But the research backs it. And I've seen it on boards, where we've had one woman, then two, then three, then four, and the conversation changes. And, even if you look at, Women for Election is politically neutral. We have no political stance. We are there for women of every political persuasion. And I am publicly politically neutral. So I have no public political views. But having said that, at the moment, we are closer to gender parity than we have ever been after the last federal election. The Senate is over 50%. The House of Reps is just under 50%. And before that, the Parliament before had the highest level of gender parity. And if you look at the discussions in the last federal term, a lot of the discussions on topics that are hard to raise, on climate change, on truth in advertising, a whole bunch, were raised by women.
Mm.
And so I think there's a fairness aspect to this. It's just the right thing to do, but the research backs it. That will change the conversations and will change the rhetoric and the level of angst. And, if anyone's ever listened to Question Time, we can change that. And so I think that's really, really important. And it's not just about women. We have a focus on women from marginalised backgrounds. So First Nations women, women from the rainbow community, multicultural women, women who live with a disability. All types of diversity are really important in government to bring that lived experience for the same reason we talked about the importance of diversity around a board table. And I think Women for Election do a incredible job. We punch way above our weight. In the last federal election, we had 46 alumni running. And for those people out there who don't know what we do, we provide education programs for free all around the country on structures of government, campaign finance, building a strategy as a political player on local, state and federal politics. And often, if you look around the country, and I'm sure this is true of other countries as well, women are in community. We're advocating, we're firefighting, we're raising funds, we're raising children, we're deep in community making a difference. Those are exactly the same skills you need in politics. But often those women, particularly from marginalised backgrounds, don't have the knowledge of the structures of government or how to even start, or there are so many structural barriers there preventing them getting a foot in. But then there's also barriers that they put on themselves about, I don't understand and it's not for me and I don't see anyone who looks like me there. And we break all of that down. And there's still work to be done on that front.
That's brilliant. And if I'd love to be able to include some links in the show notes.
Oh, absolutely.
For our listeners.
Yeah, we would be thrilled to do that.
That would be great. Are you sensing like you're making these tools and resources available? Is there a reluctance for women and people from marginalised communities to step into these roles, do you think?
Yeah, it's interesting. We don't see success just as a woman running and winning. We see success in a myriad of ways. It could be women are great at supporting other women running for politics. So success has a number of different measures. We do see, though, we've built a data lake and we're collecting some really incredible data, and we do see that sometimes it takes women multiple attendances at multiple of our programs before they get the confidence to either run or support somebody else. So I think, and I have a real problem with people telling me that women don't have confidence. I think we've got loads of confidence. I think we sometimes self-select out. Other people self-select us out or select us out, and then we've got the structural barriers. So we're dealing with a lot to get a foot in there. And if you haven't grown up in this country, I think I did a LinkedIn post at the federal election about the joy that I remembered sitting down with my dad every election, watching the election results. And so that's a really important part of my upbringing. If you haven't grown up with that, haven't grown up seeing elections in play here, come from a country where you don't have the vote or it's not a free vote, our system is quite alien. And so we're just trying to break down those barriers.
I love the work you're doing there. And I think that
the
team is vital.
Team is amazing, and a huge shout out to Licia Heath, the CEO, and the team there. They are incredible, incredible people.
Wonderful. Listen, I have so many questions for you. We could keep going for another hour easily and beyond, but I know you've got to get out of here. So I'm going to ask you a final question, then ask you to wrap up with one more question. So just quickly, how do you balance commercial imperatives with social impact in your governance work? In other words, love, the purpose side, the money side. It's not a quick question, I know, but can you share an example, perhaps, where both have come together successfully?
Oh, look, I can't share an example. I can't think of one off my head. But the question that I think it's really important to ask is, I always talk about the legal line in the sand, below which everything is illegal. I have zero tolerance for non-compliance, so never cross that line. Then there's a line above that, above which everything is legal. That grey zone in the middle is where we make our judgment calls, and where I think it's where leaders have to play increasingly. But the question is not, can we do this? The question should be, should we do this? And, the Jukan Gorge incident's a good public example, right, of a company suffering the consequences of not asking that question. And I think that's the question we should be asking. Sometimes you can absolutely do something because it's legally allowed, because, it'll make you money, it's not illegal. But should you be doing that? And I believe that if you can connect good governance, impeccable governance with purpose, companies can still make money. And that's the purpose of being a board member, right? If you can't create a financially sustainable company for the future, you're not doing your job, quite frankly.
Yeah.
But you have to be able to balance that with the should we question. And I'm convinced that you can. And having worked with some really outstanding directors around the table, that's the question that they ask themselves. What's the best result here for our people, for our shareholders, for
all
the community, for all stakeholders? It is a constant balance.
Yeah. And it requires sometimes for an organisation to make a decision to leave money on the table. Sometimes. That financial sustainability is absolutely critical.
Yeah, we can't always prioritize shareholder dividend. I don't think that's the answer. And I think increasingly, as we look at the next generation, my kids' generation coming through, they're going to pick the companies they work with or buy from with a purpose lens.
Yeah. And the dividend of balancing purpose with profit, or eventually driving profit through purpose, is trust.
Absolutely.
And trust is the currency of success.
Yeah, and it's a decreasing commodity these days.
Yeah. Shirley, thank you so much for coming. I've really enjoyed this conversation. Like I said, there's so much more we could cover. But I'm going to ask you to close out the show with an answer to this question. And then if there's anything else you'd like to add to that, please do so. But if you could achieve your greatest dream over the next 5 years with what you're trying to do through your work and with your wider efforts, what might it look like?
I think Australia has so much to offer the world. I want to see Australia increasingly step out onto that global stage with world-class services and products and education that reflect our diversity and our creativity. We have incredible minds here, and I think that's of huge value. I would like to do that through bigger boards, continuing to learn, continuing to work with amazing people, but most importantly for me, as the value proposition, opening doors for others as I go. I see that as really, really important. I think we have to constantly think of not leaving other people behind and bringing them along the journey. I think that's the long game for me, and that's the legacy that I would like to leave, that other people saw me as opening doors for them and reaching down and helping them up. And hopefully not having as many of the challenges that I had. They'll have different challenges, but if I can make my impact in the world like that and leave this place just a little bit better than the way I found it, that'll be success.
That's a beautiful vision. Shirley Chowdhary, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Carolyn.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the For Love and Money podcast. If you'd like to take a deeper dive into the purpose movement, visit us at thecauseeffect.com.au. And remember, doing good is good for business. So if you're not doing good, then what are you doing?